Have you ever been in a situation where someone's trying to tell you something, but you just can't grasp what they're saying? Now, imagine that confusion, but with 30 people all shouting at you simultaneously. Then, out of the cacophony, one word becomes crystal clear. Bear. But let me set the scene for you first. Our adventure unfolded in the breathtaking Glacier National Park. This place is nothing short of a paradise, with every corner offering a postcard-worthy view. Majestic mountains, cascading waterfalls, and serene lakes paint a landscape so beautiful that it feels surreal. Even amidst crowds of tourists, the park maintains an untouched, pristine aura. Taking advice from a friendly park ranger, we decided to hike at Many Glacier. After all, seeing an actual glacier while in Glacier National Park seemed like the logical thing to do. The ranger, with a tone of caution, stressed the importance of carrying bear spray for safety. Upon reaching our starting point for the Grinnell Glacier hike, we felt lucky to find a parking spot, having heard how challenging it can be. Eagerly, we prepped our gear and embarked on our journey. However, our enthusiasm was slightly dampened 2.6 miles in when we encountered a sign indicating the trail's closure due to bear activity. Though disappointed, we were already out in the wilderness, so we decided to soak in the beauty around us. We descended the mountain, crossed a charming little bridge, and decided to take a breather by the shimmering Swift Current Lake. As we were unwinding, enjoying the cold touch of the glacier-fed water on our feet, and savoring our snacks, a sudden uproar caught our attention. Multiple voices were shouting, and amidst the noise, the word bear was unmistakably clear. Panic surged through us. A quick note for anyone trying to warn others about a bear. Just yelling, "Bear," isn't the most helpful. Which direction is the bear coming from? In the midst of the chaos, I took charge and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Stop," with the hand signals to match, then pointed this way or that way. Luckily, that got their attention, and the answer was this way. Now we knew the direction the bear was coming from. With the bear's direction now clear, adrenaline kicked in, and we had to make a snap decision. We then had to make a split-second decision. Luckily, the blood was pumping, because I wouldn't have chosen to wade through a glacier-fed lake 5 minutes before. We waded across, pushing, pulling, and a little carrying, involved to make it to where the lake and a significant portion of reeds are between where we were and where the bear was now. I will mention that in all this time, we never actually saw the bear, which is a little safer and just a little disappointing. In the meantime, there was a little crying, a little grateful to be alive, and a little regret for the shoes we left behind, and the feet that are now more than a little worse for wear. The park ranger comes sidling up the path, cool as a cucumber, and asks if we saw a bear. We told him there was a bear, and we left our shoes. He says, "No worries, I'll go check it out, and your shoes will likely be saved." 2 of our group head back, with the ranger of course, and get the shoes. They also meet up with a guy who videoed the encounter. Fact, the bear wasn't coming for us. He was using the path and bridge that was only 10 yards away from where we were moments before. He scratched his butt on the bridge and moved on. Apparently, bears don't want to walk through the cold glacier water or prickly reeds either. We made it back to the trailhead in the fastest 2 miles ever. The bear activity sign is revised to 2.1 miles ahead. Now, we know to always trust bear warnings. During my years of solo traveling, I've encountered numerous unexpected and sometimes frightening situations. One such memory is of a chilling dive into a frigid ocean, hoping to swim alongside wild dolphins. Instead, I was met with the intimidating gaze of a fur seal. In another instance, in the city of Dunedin, I ended up spending a whopping $400 on taxis, all because I couldn't spot the bus I was supposed to take. But among all these tales, my time in Morocco stands out the most. My European gap year brought me to Morocco for a month. Marrakech was my first stop, where I immersed myself in the local culture. I baked traditional bread with local women, wandered through the vibrant streets, and even indulged in a traditional Moroccan hammam. However, as time flew, I had to prepare for my next destination, Turkey. To reach Turkey, I needed to catch a flight from Casablanca Airport. Originally, I had planned to stay in Morocco for another week, dreaming of visiting the famous blue city of Chefchaouen. But my mom got nervous after experiencing the woes of being a female in Marrakech, and I found out it's especially dangerous to climb the Atlas Mountains in winter, so it wasn't entirely her fault. This change in plans left me with an unexpected 3-day stay in Casablanca. The city, to my surprise, felt like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. Buildings seemed to be perpetually under construction. Streets were eerily empty and covered in layers of dust, and the few locals I encountered looked as weary as the city itself. For convenience, I checked into a Best Western near the train station, mainly because it was the best deal I could get using my credit card points. In Morocco, there's a golden rule for travelers: steer clear of uncooked food. This is due to the local practice of washing produce in tap water, which often doesn't sit well with foreign stomachs. One evening, after a particularly tiring day, I dined at the hotel's restaurant. Along with my main dish, I was served a fresh salad. Beaten down from the day, fed up with my anxiety, and generally starving, I took a bite without thinking. I swallowed and realized my mistake. But it couldn't be that bad, right? I mean, Best Western is an American chain. Surely their employees use American standards for their food. Nope. I was wrong. The very next day, I was struck with severe food poisoning, and the timing couldn't have been worse. I had to embark on my journey to Turkey. The flight was nothing short of a nightmare. It was genuinely the second worst flight of my life, after the time I flew with an ear infection. There was nowhere to buy a ginger ale or water before boarding the flight at the airport. The poor stewardess couldn't understand why I wanted puke bags before we'd even taken off. The man next to me was visibly cringing as far away from me as possible. But it doesn't end there. Once I arrived in Turkey, I thought the nightmare would be over, until I realized I was a day early for my visa. Upon my turbulent arrival in Turkey, I thought my string of misfortunes was over. But to my dismay, I discovered an oversight with my visa dates. I had previously secured a visitor's visa online for $75, but due to my rescheduled trip, I was a day early. The airport's visa kiosks were malfunctioning, adding hours to my ordeal. Drained and unwell, I finally managed to reach my hotel in Turkey. The next 3 days saw me confined to my room, with the exception of a necessary hospital visit. The moral of my story: always double-check your travel documents and be wary of where and what you eat. When I was 22, I moved to Japan to work as an English teacher. After only having lived in the country for a few months, I was hit by a car while out for a morning jog. The lady who hit me thankfully pulled her car over, but was hysterical as she dialed emergency services and got out to check on me. Fortunately, while I had some pretty bad scrapes on my legs and cuts all over my face and hands, I was able to pull myself off the road and onto the curb. Now, I should add that I am actually half Japanese and have both Japanese middle and last names, but I was born and raised in the USA. Besides English, I grew up speaking Cantonese, my other half, and not Japanese. Knowing how confusing this would be for a homogeneous society such as Japan, the first sentence I learned in Japanese prior to moving was, "Please excuse me, I'm American, and I don't understand Japanese." So back to my crazy story. Both the driver and medical responders grew increasingly concerned and confused, as all I kept repeating was, "I don't understand Japanese," in Japanese. As I rode in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, a paramedic asked me the list of routine health questions. But when the Japanese got too difficult, I explained again that I was not from Japan and couldn't understand much Japanese. So then he repeated the question louder, as if shouting the question again would help me understand another language better. I began laughing and making sarcastic jokes in English, which only made things worse. Once at the hospital, the whole process of figuring out what my deal was began all over again. Why does she keep saying she doesn't understand Japanese? Her name is Japanese. And she keeps saying she doesn't understand in Japanese. Her head must have been injured. In the end, they were so worried by my repetition of the only Japanese phrase I knew, and bursts of English, that they did a full head scan and more exams than I could remember to see if the accident had caused any brain trauma. Despite what could have easily resulted in a terrible day, I learned to find the silver lining in every situation, especially when abroad. Sometimes you just have to have a sense of humor and roll with the punches. Or in my case, wherever the car sends you flying. Throughout my hiking adventures in the Caribbean, I always felt a sense of accomplishment. But my experience changed dramatically when I took on the trails of Colombia. One particular hike that stands out was to the Santa Isabel Glacier, an awe-inspiring snow-capped volcano. The challenge was real, especially with the towering elevation of 4,965 meters. Breathing became a task, each breath shallower than the last due to the thin air. To add to the challenge, the weather was not on my side. A cold drizzle persisted, and the temperature hovered around a chilly 1 degree Celsius. My determination to witness the glacier's beauty was unwavering. However, my pace was noticeably slower than the rest of the group. The guide, recognizing my struggle, suggested I continue at a pace comfortable for me. He emphasized that he'd proceed with the others and reminded me to start my descent by 12 p.m. As I trudged on, the glacier's grandeur finally unveiled itself. I paused, captivated, and took several photos to remember the moment. Realizing it was already 12 p.m., I began my journey back. But after about 15 minutes, anxiety set in. The absence of familiar faces made me question if I was on the right trail. I tried to reassure myself by following what appeared to be footprints. But my confidence waned when a dense fog enveloped the surroundings, obscuring my vision. Panic surged. Was I off the trail? Alone and lost? I shouted. hoping someone from the group would hear. My calls echoed back, unanswered. I found a rock to sit on, tears blurring my vision. My mind raced with thoughts of survival, rationing my food, and the potential dangers lurking, like the much-feared puma. Mustering all the strength I had, I screamed once more. After an agonizing wait, a distant hello pierced through the fog. The wave of relief was indescribable. It was the guide, the very same one who had moved ahead with the group. Determined not to lose him again, I stuck close, matching his steps. Together, we navigated our way down, and soon I was safely back in the car, heading to the comfort of my hotel. My grand advice, which seems obvious in hindsight, is to never lose sight of your guide. A few years ago, I embarked on a memorable spring break adventure to Amsterdam with a couple of friends. We dedicated an entire week to exploring the city's wonders, ticking off activities from our Amsterdam bucket list, and relishing a well-deserved break from school. On our final evening, we decided to chill in our Airbnb. We indulged in a weed brownie, which seemed fitting given Amsterdam's reputation, and began packing our bags for the journey home. As the effects of the brownie set in, our hunger grew, leading us to order some pizza. As the delivery time approached, my boyfriend and I decided to head downstairs to collect our order. We assumed our friend was right behind us, following our lead. But that simple assumption led to a series of unexpected events. The moment our friend stepped out of the Airbnb, the door swung shut, locking automatically. And, as luck would have it, the key was inside the apartment. Suddenly, we found ourselves trapped in the building's cold corridor in the middle of winter. To make matters even more challenging, we were all in our pajamas. Among the three of us, only I had something on my feet, a pair of comfy slippers. My phone, equipped with a local SIM, was our only hope. But with the battery dangerously low, the situation became even more tense. We dialed our host repeatedly, hoping for a solution. Thankfully, after about 45 minutes of calling and lots of tears, we finally reached our host, and he said we could pick up the spare key from his home, located right in the middle of Amsterdam's red light district. With no time to lose, we ordered an Uber. The driver managed to get us close, but due to restrictions, couldn't drop us right at the doorstep. Most of the street was closed for cars. Since I was the only one wearing shoes, I made the trek through the red light district to find the host's apartment and get the key. It was a bit hard to find in the dark, and running through the red light district in my pajamas was a little embarrassing. But we eventually made it back with the key and were able to get back inside. Although we weren't in any true danger, this remains as one of my stressful travel experiences to date. It taught me a crucial lesson. Always have your key with you when stepping out, even if it's just for a brief moment. I was excited about my very first trip to Brazil, even though it meant taking a plane from NYC to Atlanta, and then another long flight from Atlanta to Rio. To make matters worse, a massive blizzard canceled my flight to Atlanta, and the best I could get was a flight from Philadelphia to Atlanta, where I could make a connecting flight to Rio. I thought I could just take a bus down to Atlanta. If I left right away, the bus would get me to Atlanta 7 hours before my plane to Rio left. The plan seemed flawless. The first part of the bus trip proceeded from New York to Washington, D.C., without much incident. There, I needed to transfer buses to continue to Atlanta, which was fine. It was at Richmond, Virginia, that the trip began turning into a travel horror story. Our driver told us we needed to make a brief stop there. Well, that brief stop turned into 2 hours. Finally, our driver announced that our bus had been canceled due to a technical malfunction. We would have to wait in the station for several hours for the next possible bus, and spaces were not guaranteed. I burst into tears, and a nearby driver took pity on me and informed me he could take me as far as Raleigh, North Carolina. Even though it was 4 in the morning and I was running on no food, no sleep, and no shower, I could see that all I needed to do was get to the Raleigh airport and beg Delta Airlines to put me on a plane to Atlanta. I was short on cash, but fortunately, I found a woman on the bus to split a cab with me to the airport. When we arrived, I managed to drag my near corpse to the help desk, where I relayed the entire story, in one breath, in a high-pitched wail. My pleas paid off, and about an hour and a half later, I was onboarding the brief flight to Atlanta, where my uncle was waiting with a shower, lunch, and a place for me to nap before my flight to Brazil. Even though this was my worst travel experience ever, it taught me to never give up and never be embarrassed to ask for help. For my first solo international trip, I booked tickets to Maldives. I was very excited and anxious at the same time. I decided that instead of the backpackers' favorite Mafushi Island, I'd stay on Guli Island. It's smaller, less crowded, and according to reviews, it had a nice beach. I booked my room there via Airbnb. I chatted with the host about the details and even reserved a boat tour with other guests in advance. When I arrived in the island, the hotel was closed down. A local approached me and said it had been closed for 3 months already, and I was not the first guest to find out this way. I didn't know what to do. I could rent a private boat to take me to Mafushi Island, since public transfers were limited. I could stay in Guli and find another hotel. Either way would set me back a few $100s, and I was already in a tight budget. The local guy helped me, and we approached every hotel and resort on the island. Everywhere was fully booked, except for the last one. The owner at Silver Shade Guest House listened to my story, and he was very kind. He invited me to dinner with his staff later that night. Unfortunately, the story does not end here, since I had stomachache from the unfamiliar food the day after. I skipped going on the boat tour, but my new host took me snorkeling on the best spots in the island and even showed me the breeding area for baby sharks. He was especially careful to check on me, since at that time I didn't know how to swim properly. I couldn't emphasize how kind and generous the Maldivians are. Even though the Airbnb scam was traumatizing in itself, the kindness and hospitality of the locals I'd witnessed during my trip was enough for me to want to visit there again. Airbnb eventually gave me a refund, but for some reason, they did not remove the listing of the hotel that scammed me. All in all, it was a story worth telling, especially as a precaution, but now I can laugh about it. This creepy travel story happened nearly 15 years ago when visiting Granada in Spain. My boyfriend and I arrived in the city quite late and totally missed the opening hours of the Alhambra, so we just walked around and stumbled upon a nice-looking park. It was a bit on the wilder side, with plenty of wild greenery, animals roaming around, though it was also beautiful, romantic, and felt quite private. As dusk fell, we decided to make our way out since it started to get a bit creepy. There were no people around, and all that we could hear were strange animal sounds. However, when we went to pull open the gate, we realized in horror that it was locked. Talk about scary travel experiences. We were trapped. The whole park had a high brick wall around it. Desperately, we walked around in the dark before cell phones had flashlights on them, found the deserted premises of a local keeper, and then bumped into a small group of scared Spanish students. They were freaking out, too. Together, we roamed the park and found a ladder. In the dark, we managed to find an acceptable spot to climb the wall and survived to tell the tale. And now the facts. The park was in fact the Carmen de los Martires Garden, which closes its gate at 8 p.m. during the summer months. Apparently, there are only peacocks and ducks in the park, but in our state of distress, we let our imagination run wild. Also, peacocks sleeping in trees look like vultures. Lesson learned, don't be lazy and check the opening hours. The least you can do is just glance at a sign upon entering an unknown place. When I was just 8 years old, I went on an exciting trip to Yugoslavia with my mom and dad. One sunny day, we strolled over to a neighboring village and found this cool little shop filled with trinkets and souvenirs. But just as I was getting into it, my parents were already rushing to leave. I didn't even get to see half of what was inside. Now, every day during our trip, my parents loved taking their afternoon naps. So, one day, when they dozed off, I saw my chance. I quietly slipped out of our hotel room and made my way back to that fascinating shop by the sea. I took my time, looking at all the neat stuff they had. But here's where things got tricky. On my way back, I reached a split in the road. Uh-oh. Which way was our hotel? I tried the path by the beach first, but something felt off. So, I backtracked and tried the other route, which led uphill. Still, nothing looked familiar. I was lost and started to panic. Standing there on top of a hill, I could see our hotel in the distance. But between me and safety was this huge field bursting with colorful flowers. I thought about crossing it, but my little heart was racing, and tears started to flow. Cars rarely passed by on that quiet road, but then a kind man stopped. We tried talking, but neither of us understood the other. He drove off, leaving me feeling even more alone. But then, another car pulled up. This time, the driver spoke English. He told me he was on his way to pick up his wife from the airport, but promised to help me afterward. I felt safe seeing his young child in the back seat, so I hopped in. At the airport, he treated me to a Toblerone chocolate bar. It was so warm that day that the chocolate melted all over my face. His wife, seeing the mess, helped clean me up. True to his word, after that, he drove me straight to my hotel. When we arrived, I saw police officers talking to my super worried parents. The moment they saw me, their faces lit up with relief. The kind man didn't even leave his name, and to this day, my parents wish they could have thanked him properly. It just goes to show there are some real heroes out there. Once, my family and I decided to escape the city hustle and venture into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a place known as the UP Imagine vast forests, stretching as far as the eye can see, with long drives where you might not spot another soul or even a gas station. It's a paradise for nature lovers, but also a place where help isn't around the corner. Our destination? a rustic cabin deep in the woods, accessible only by a 12-mile dirt track. No electricity, no phone signals, just the pure wilderness experience. We pumped water from a well, used a quaint outhouse, and enjoyed meals cooked over a campfire. On our first night, after tucking the kids into their beds, I was jolted awake by a loud banging on the front window. It was so intense. I feared the glass would shatter at any moment. My mind raced. Was it a person? Or maybe a wild animal? A bear? A cougar? But when my husband bravely pulled back the blinds, we were met with an even bigger surprise. A massive, furious moose. If you've never seen one up close, let me tell you, they're gigantic. The cabin echoed with the screams of our terrified kids as the moose continued its assault. Armed with just a flashlight and a gun, my husband tried to scare it away, shouting and flashing the light. The window started to crack under the moose's force, but miraculously, it held. After what felt like hours, the moose moved to the cabin's side, banged a few more times, and then, finally, retreated into the darkness. That night, the serene woods transformed into a scene from a thriller, making it the most unforgettable vacation memory ever. When I was about 14, I went on the French exchange. We were sent to Paris. While in Paris, the first thing that happened was that my friend and I were walking near the Eiffel Tower and stopped to buy a souvenir. My friend specifically wanted a crystal with the tower etched into it, but he asked him if there were any other colors available. The sales guy replied, yes, and stupidly, we both followed him behind the counter, where he shoved us into a room, picked me up, and put me on a stool. He started playing with my hair and telling me how much I reminded him of his daughter. My friend kept getting closer and closer to the door, and I reached in my pocket, made my phone ring, and in broken French pretended like our host family was calling us. My friend managed to open the door, and we bolted. It honestly took us a while to fully understand we could have been kidnapped. Same trip, we all got in a tiny elevator. The French kids pushed an extra 2 people in. Keep in mind, the elevator was designed to hold only 4 people at most, and the elevator kept going up until it reached the very top. The elevator got stuck because of the weight, and the French firemen had to come and rescue us. I remember them telling us to be extremely still because the elevator was going to fall with that much weight. We were all extremely terrified that we weren't going to make it out alive, but I am glad to be alive sharing this today. Back when I was in high school, my buddy and I decided to go on a camping trip. We were joined by my older sister and her tall, intimidating friend. Picture this: 2 tents in a buzzing campground, surrounded by the chatter of other campers. Late at night, when the world was silent and the moon was shining bright, I was jolted awake by a strange sound, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Peeking through the tent, I saw the shadows of 2 figures circling our tents, illuminated by either the moon or a nearby streetlight. My heart raced. Every horror movie I'd ever watched flashed before my eyes. I wanted to nudge my friend awake, but I was paralyzed with fear. What if she made a noise? So, I lay there, trying to be as still as a statue, even though my entire body was trembling. The longest 10 minutes of my life passed before the mysterious figures finally disappeared. Sleep was out of the question after that. I was on high alert, listening to every rustle and chirp. Come morning, my sister shared her own chilling tale. She'd been awake too, clutching a hunting knife, ready to defend us. She thought maybe her big truck and her friends' large boots outside their tent might have deterred the strangers, making them think there were guys inside. Whatever their intentions were, we weren't sticking around to find out. We packed up faster than ever and left that place behind. That night haunted my dreams for a long time, serving as a reminder of what could have gone wrong that night. Back in my high school days, I won a scholarship to attend a summer program in London. It was my first time away from home, and the excitement was real. I made friends quickly, and together we decided to make the most of our European adventure. On our list, the legendary city of Amsterdam, a place we'd only heard wild stories about. We explored Amsterdam's winding canals, tried some local treats, and even dared each other to try out their famous bike lanes, way harder than they look. But as memorable as the city was, it was our journey back to London that became the talk of the summer. Just as our plane soared into the sky, a massive flock of birds decided to have a face-off with our engine. There was a loud thud, and suddenly, the inside of the plane smelled like a barbecue party. Yep, roasted bird. The plane jolted, making a sharp turn that sent some bags flying from the overhead compartments. People were gripping their armrests, eyes wide, and I swear I heard someone say, "I knew I should have taken the train." But our pilots, they were the real MVPs. Keeping their cool, they announced an emergency landing. The plane touched down smoothly, and everyone burst into applause. We were safe, thanks to the quick thinking of our flight crew. Back in London, our Amsterdam adventure became an instant legend. Sure, we had fun exploring the city, but it was the unexpected plane drama that made it unforgettable. And me? I learned two things. Always respect the power of nature, and maybe consider trains for short trips. Vacations are fun, but always keep an eye on your children. One sunny day in Florida, my family and I were chilling by the pool at a fancy resort. I was splashing around, and my little cousin and sister were playing nearby. But in what felt like the blink of an eye, they vanished. Panic set in. My dad and uncle, with their hearts racing, started searching everywhere. Our moms were out shopping, so it was up to us to find them. Being in a foreign country, the worst thoughts crossed our minds. What if someone had lured them away? Just as we were about to alert the resort's security, my uncle spotted them. And here's the shocker. They were quite a distance from the pool, stacked on top of each other, posing for a stranger with a camera. My uncle, furious, confronted the man, who claimed he worked for the resort and had the girls' permission to take photos. But here's the thing. My sister and cousin were only 8 years old. Back then, being 10, I didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. But now, I totally get why my uncle was livid. Moral of the story? Always watch over your kids, especially on vacation. Even if someone seems friendly, you never know their true intentions. I'm just grateful my uncle acted fast. One night in New York, my friend and I had a wild encounter. We were in Times Square, a bit tipsy and craving some McDonald's. Inside, there was this shady guy just hanging around, not eating. Let's call him Sketchy Dude. Sketchy Dude kept trying to give us something, saying, "Take this." I ignored him, but my friend, being polite, kept saying, "No." Eventually, my friend took the item, thinking it would make Sketchy Dude leave us alone. Big mistake. Suddenly, Sketchy Dude claimed it was drugs and demanded money. He even said another random guy in the restaurant was with him, and they'd both hurt us if we didn't pay. We were outnumbered, and running wasn't an option. I tried to offer him £5 saying it was worth a lot. He didn't buy it, so I gave him $20. I tried signaling the staff for help, but they either didn't get it or didn't want to get involved. But Sketchy Dude wanted more. I firmly told him I'd give him another $20, but then he had to leave. He agreed, took the money, and dashed out. The other guy? He just stayed, minding his business. Turns out, they didn't even know each other. My friend checked the drugs Sketchy Dude gave us. Guess what? It was just napkins. We laughed it off, but I was still worried about getting in trouble. The lesson? If someone sketchy approaches you, it's best to ignore them. Engaging can lead to trouble. In the end, we were safe, and I got a $1.40 story to share with you all. Last summer, my girlfriend and I embarked on a backpacking journey to Croatia. We touched down in Split, the second largest city in Croatia, and, after some searching, found our place to stay. We took a break to escape the midday heat, but soon the allure of the city beckoned us. Walking around, we couldn't help but notice the heavy police presence. They were everywhere, equipped with big guns, dogs, and armor. We remembered hearing about Croatia's intense soccer fans and thought, maybe this is just how things are here. But as we ventured further, things took a strange turn. Every route we knew back to our accommodation was blocked by police. Not that way, they'd say. The streets were filling up with locals, and we felt a growing unease. Navigating through the winding streets around Diocletian's palace, loud bangs echoed around us, accompanied by shouts and chants. Lost and alarmed on our first day, we finally emerged onto a main street by the sea. To our shock, about 3,000 people were on either side, shouting behind barriers. Smoke billowed in the distance. Retracing our steps, we encountered hundreds of people rushing past us, their panic palpable. The sharp sting of CS gas filled the air. Trying another route, we discovered the cause of the commotion. A small gay pride parade of 50 people. They were marching in response to a tragic incident where a homosexual had been killed by the police a few weeks prior. The entire city seemed to have turned out, not in support, but in opposition. Thousands against a handful. That day was a stark reminder of the world's complexities. It was both eye-opening and terrifying, an experience we'll never forget. In the heart of summer, my family and I were buzzing with excitement. We'd planned a trip to Splashville, the most talked about water parks a few states over. It was me, my husband, and our two little adventurers. I will call them Mia and Max. Max, with his bright blue eyes and infectious laughter, has severe autism. He doesn't speak and sometimes doesn't understand danger. Remember this. It's crucial for what's coming. After what felt like an eternity on the road, with the countless, "Are we there yet?" From Mia, we finally pulled up to our hotel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The kids, tired from the journey, plopped down in front of the TV, while Jake gave me a playful nudge, pointing at the mountain of bags I'd packed. We both laughed, and he convinced me to help him unload our trusty Tahoe. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue on everything, We chatted and laughed as we made our way to the car. But when we turned back, a chilling sight awaited us. Our hotel room door was slightly open. I felt a knot in my stomach. Racing inside, I found Mia, still lost in her cartoon world. But Max? He was gone. Our hearts raced. We called out for Max, ran through the hotel's corridors, and even knocked on doors, hoping someone had seen him. The town's recent tragic event with a girl named Shasta haunted my thoughts, making me even more frantic. Just when hope seemed to fade, a group of local teens approached, with Max happily clutching a toy car one of them had given him. They'd found him in the parking lot, fascinated by the lights of a vending machine. The weight of my relief was so immense that I crumbled to the ground, tears streaming down. That evening wasn't just a reminder of the dangers out there, but also of the kindness of strangers. It was a summer trip we will never forget. All right, this wraps up our collection of travel horror stories for today. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that subscribe button. We've got more exciting stories brewing for you. Got a story? Share it with us at screamflix1@gmail.com. Also, drop a comment below about which story stood out to you. For me, story 3 hit me hard. How about you?